Dr. Alan Wright rubbed his tired eyes and looked again at the computer screen. For 20 years he had worked at this small observatory in Montana, listening to the stars. Most people thought he was crazy. Why spend night after night looking for signals from space when newer, better computers could do the job? Tonight was different. Tonight his old equipment picked up something the fancy new machines missed. The pattern repeated every 12 minutes. It was not random noise. It was not a pulsar or any natural space object Alan knew about. After 3 days without sleep, Alan was sure this was a message from someone out there. When he decoded it, his hands shook. The message was clear. Warning, do not respond. They are listening. Alan called his boss right away. Susan, I found something. You need to see this now, he said, not hiding his excitement. Dr. Susan Miller sighed on the other end of the line. Alan, it's 3 a.m. Can't this wait until office hours? No, it can't. I found a signal. An actual signal from the Carina Nebula. It's a warning. A warning? Susan's voice was flat. What kind of warning? It says not to respond to something, that they are listening. Alan. Susan paused. When was the last time you slept? Alan ignored the question. The message includes coordinates and a time. Something is coming, Susan, in less than 3 months. Listen, why don't you email me your data? I'll look at it tomorrow. Get some sleep, Alan. The call ended. Alan stared at his phone, then at the message still blinking on his screen. No one would believe him. Not after what happened at Harvard. Not after his ideas about alien intelligence cost him his job and reputation. Alan wasn't the only one who found the message. In Oregon, 16-year-old Kathy Peterson adjusted her homemade radio antenna on her bedroom window. A storm was coming, and she hoped to catch some interesting atmospheric sounds for her science project. Instead, her equipment picked up a strange pattern. Kathy recorded it and posted on an online forum for amateur radio enthusiasts. Caught this weird signal tonight. Anyone know what it might be? In Florida, retired Navy communications expert George Harris sat bolt upright in his chair. His hobby equipment had just picked up something he hadn't heard since his military days. It reminded him of encrypted messages, but unlike any code used by Earth militaries, and in Australia, satellite. Engineer Linda Clark was running routine tests when her equipment caught a fragment of an unusual transmission. The computer flagged it as an error, but Linda knew better. This was a deliberate signal bouncing off one of the satellites she monitored. None of these people knew each other. But within 2 days, they all found their way to the same obscure online forum where Kathy had posted her recording. This is not random, George wrote. I worked in Navy communications for 30 years. This is an intelligent signal. I've isolated part of the message, Linda replied. It contains what looks like star coordinates. I've decoded more. Alan joined in, using a username that wouldn't connect to his real identity. It's a warning. Someone is telling us to stay quiet because someone else is listening. Over the next week, the 4 strangers worked together online. They combined their recordings and knowledge. The full message became clear. Warning, do not respond. They are listening. Krex Empire scouts approaching your system. Expected arrival at coordinates 4321 by 56.78 in 82 of your days. Previous assistance system active but dormant. Activation protocol follows. What does this mean? Kathy asked in their private chat group. It means we're not alone, Alan wrote, and we're in danger. We need to tell someone, Linda suggested. The government, the military, someone who can do something about this. They won't believe us, George replied. I know how these things work. Without proof they can touch and see, they'll think we're crazy. We have proof, Alan insisted. We have the signal. The next morning, Alan walked into the office of Dr. Susan Miller. He placed a flash drive on her desk. Here's the data I promised. I've run every test I know. This is real, Susan. Susan sighed and plugged in the drive. She looked at the charts and numbers on her screen. Alan, this could be anything. Cosmic background radiation. A pulsar we haven't cataloged yet. Even interference from Earth sources. I've ruled all those out, Alan said. Look at the pattern. It repeats exactly, but with slight variations that follow mathematical rules. Nature doesn't do that. Susan leaned back in her chair. Alan, I know things have been hard since Jane died. But seeing aliens and radio noise won't bring her back. Alan felt his face grow hot. This has nothing to do with my wife. Look at the data. I am looking, and I see an overworked, grief-stricken man finding patterns where there are none. Susan's voice softened. Take some time off, Alan. Get some rest. See that therapist I recommended? Alan walked out without another word. In the parking lot, he called the other three. My boss didn't believe me. He told them, we need to try someone else. I contacted my old Navy commander, George said. He laughed and said I'd been watching too many sci-fi movies. My professor said it was interesting, but probably just equipment malfunction, Kathy added. Same here, Linda sighed. My supervisor said the satellite was due for recalibration anyway. Alan looked up at the clear blue sky. Somewhere up there, something was coming. Something that made an unknown alien friend worried enough to send a warning. We need a new plan, he said. If no one will listen, we'll have to handle this ourselves. What can 4 people do against an alien empire? Linda asked. Find this assistance system the message mentioned, Alan replied. The warning said, it's dormant but active. That means it exists and we just need to turn it on. And how do we do that? George asked. The message mentioned an activation protocol, Alan said. We need to figure out what that means. As the sun set over the Montana hills, Alan looked again at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. He had spent his life searching for signs of intelligence out there. Now he'd found it, and it terrified him. They had 82 days to save the world, and no one would help them. The 4 strangers met in person for the first time at a small diner off the highway near Denver. Alan arrived first, nervous and looking over his shoulder. He had driven all night to get there. Kathy came with her parents, who were worried about their daughter meeting people from the internet but became convinced after seeing the signal data. George flew in from Florida, and Linda made the long journey from Australia. So we're all here, George said, looking at the unlikely group. Now what? Alan spread papers across the table. We need to convince someone with power to listen to us. I've tried the scientific community. They think I'm crazy. I've tried my military contacts, George added. Same result. Linda sipped her coffee. We need evidence they can't ignore. Kathy, the youngest of the group, had been quiet until now. What about the coordinates in the message? What's there? They all looked at the numbers again. Alan had plotted them on a star chart. It's empty space as far as I can tell, Alan said. But that's where the message says these Kreks will arrive. Maybe we need to look closer, Linda suggested. I have access to better telescopes through my work. I can point one that way. And I have a friend at NASA, George said. He owes me a favor. Maybe he can help without officially getting involved. Over the next 2 weeks, they gathered what information they could. Linda's telescope observations showed nothing unusual. George's NASA contact found nothing but agreed to keep looking. Alan went back to his observatory and listened for more messages. Kathy worked on decoding the activation protocol mentioned in the warning. Then, 65 days before the predicted arrival date, Kathy made a breakthrough. The activation protocol isn't just code, she told the others during their nightly video call. It's coordinates too on the moon. The moon? George frowned. Are you saying there's something on the moon that can help us? That's exactly what I'm saying, Kathy replied. The message mentions an assistance system that's dormant but active. What if it's a defense system built by aliens, hidden on the moon? It sounded crazy, but after everything they'd learned, it also made sense. Even if you're right, Linda said. How do we activate something on the moon? None of us have a rocket. No, Alan agreed. But George has a friend at NASA. George looked doubtful. Randy helps me look at some space photos. That's different from asking him to send something to the moon. We don't need to send anything, Kathy explained. The protocol is a signal. We just need to broadcast it from Earth toward those coordinates on the moon. And how do we do that? Linda asked. Alan smiled for the first time in days. I know someone who can help with that. Dr. Olivia Brown had been Alan's teacher and mentor years ago, before his theories about alien intelligence damaged his career. She now ran a large radio telescope array in New Mexico. "Alan," she said when he visited her office. "It's been a long time." "Too long," he agreed. "Olivia, I need your help." She listened as he explained about the signal and the warning. To his surprise, she didn't immediately dismiss him. "Show me your data," she said. For hours, they went over his findings. Finally, she leaned back in her chair. "I don't know what to make of this, Alan. The signal is real, I'll give you that. But alien warnings? Defense systems on the moon? That's a lot to accept." "I know how it sounds," Alan said. "But what if I'm right? What if something is coming and we're not prepared?" Olivia thought for a moment. "What exactly do you want to do with my telescope array?" "Send a signal to these coordinates on the moon." Alan showed her Kathy's calculations. "Just once. That's all I'm asking. And if nothing happens, then I'm wrong, and I'll admit it. I'll stop with the alien theories for good." Olivia sighed. "I must be crazy too. Fine. One signal during maintenance hours when no one is watching. But Alan, this is it. If nothing happens, you get help. Real help." Alan agreed. 2 days later, in the early morning hours, Olivia allowed him to use the array to send the activation signal toward the coordinates on the moon. George, Linda, and Kathy watched via video call. Nothing happened. "I'm sorry, Alan," Olivia said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "I really am." Alan nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. He had been so sure. As they were shutting down the equipment, one of Olivia's assistants rushed in. "Dr. Brown, you need to see this," he said, pointing to a monitor. "The lunar orbital satellite just picked up an energy surge at these coordinates." On the screen, a small area on the far side of the moon glowed with activity that hadn't been there before. "That's it," Alan whispered. "That's the assistance system." "My God," Olivia said. "You were right." Within hours, other observatories around the world noticed the energy readings from the moon. NASA called an emergency meeting. The military got involved. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to Alan and his friends. At the Pentagon, they met with Admiral Frank White, the highest-ranking officer willing to listen to them. "Let me get this straight," the Admiral said. "You received a warning from some alien friend about another alien enemy coming to Earth, and you've activated some kind of defense system on the moon that's been there for who knows how long." "That's the short version, yes," George replied. "And this enemy, these Kreks, will arrive in about 2 months?" 58 days, Kathy corrected him. The Admiral rubbed his forehead. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've activated an unknown weapon system on the moon without authorization. That's a violation of about a dozen international treaties." "With all due respect, sir," Linda said, "if we're right, those treaties won't matter in 2 months." Admiral White looked at them for a long moment. "I'm going to have to report this to my superiors. In the meantime, you four aren't going anywhere." As guards escorted them to a secure waiting room, Alan looked at his new friends. They had done it. Someone with power was finally listening. But was it too late? Outside, unknown to everyone on Earth, something shifted in deep space. The defense system on the moon had begun broadcasting a signal of its own, a warning to the approaching Krek ships, or perhaps something more. The countdown to arrival had begun. For 3 days, Alan, George, Linda, and Kathy stayed in a secure military facility. They were given comfortable rooms but could not leave or contact anyone outside. Men in suits asked them the same questions over and over. How did they find the signal? Who else knew about it? What exactly did the message say? On the 4th day, Admiral White came to see them. "We've confirmed your findings," he said, looking tired. "Something is definitely active on the far side of the moon, and our deep space monitors have detected objects moving toward Earth, just as you predicted." "So you believe us now?" Alan asked. "Let's just say we're taking the possibility seriously," the Admiral replied. "The President has been briefed. The military is on high alert, but we're keeping this quiet for now to prevent panic." "What happens next?" Linda asked. "We've assembled a team of experts. Scientists, military strategists, linguists. We want the four of you to join them. You know more about this than anyone. They were moved to a larger facility in Colorado, deep inside a mountain. There they met dozens of people working around the clock to understand the approaching threat. Dr. Olivia Brown was there too. She gave Alan a small smile when she saw him. "I'm sorry I doubted you," she said. "You helped when it mattered," Alan replied. They worked with the experts, sharing everything they knew. The military pointed their best telescopes and sensors toward the coordinates where the Kreks would arrive. At first they saw nothing unusual. Then 42 days before the predicted arrival date, they detected something. "Energy readings at the edge of our solar system," a scientist announced during the morning briefing. "Like nothing we've seen before." On the big screen, they watched as strange distortions appeared near Neptune's orbit. The distortions grew larger and then objects began to emerge from them. Large objects. Ship-shaped objects. "We're counting at least 50 vessels," someone said, each one bigger than an aircraft carrier. The room went silent. Until now there had still been some doubt, some hope that it was all a mistake or misunderstanding. That hope was gone. "They're not using any propulsion system we recognize." "OE," NASA scientists said, "but they're accelerating toward Earth at an incredible rate." "How long until they get here?" the Admiral asked. "At their current speed, 7 days." 7 days? The warning said 58 more days. Alan looked at the approaching ships. Maybe they detected the activation of the moon base. Maybe that made them hurry. The next week was a blur of activity. The world's governments were secretly informed. Military forces were placed on high alert under the cover of joint exercises. Scientists worked frantically to understand the alien technology. And still the Kreks fleet came closer. 6 days after they were first spotted, the fleet entered Earth orbit. 53 massive ships surrounding the planet like dark stars. People around the world looked up and saw them, bright points of light moving across the night sky. Panic began to spread. News outlets reported unidentified objects in orbit. Social media exploded with theories. The governments could no longer keep it secret. Then the Kreks sent their message. It came to every television, radio, computer, and phone on Earth at the same time. A voice speaking in perfect English. "Sentient organisms of Earth. Your planet is now under the control of the Kreks Empire. We have determined that your world has resources valuable to us. You are primitive, but potentially useful. Surrender now, and some of you may continue to exist as servants. Resist and you will be eliminated. You have 24 hours to dismantle all weapons and defensive systems as proof of submission." In the mountain facility, Alan and the others watched the message with horror. "What do we do now?" Kathy asked, her voice small. "We can't fight them," a general said. "You've seen their ships. Their technology is far beyond ours." "We can't surrender." "Either," another officer argued. "They'll just use us and then destroy us anyway." Admiral White turned to Alan. "What about the moon base? The assistance system? Is it doing anything?" Alan looked at the readings from the lunar facility. "It's active, but I don't know what it's supposed to do. The warning message didn't explain." "So we activated some alien device and we don't even know what it does?" the general asked. "Great, just great." "There has to be more to the message," Linda said. "Something we missed." They went back to the original signal, analyzing every part of it again. While they worked, the world outside descended into chaos. Some people fled to the countryside. Others gathered in churches and temples to pray. Soldiers prepared for a battle they couldn't win. Hours passed. The deadline grew closer. "Wait," Kathy said suddenly. She had been the quietest of the group, the youngest, but now her voice was sharp with excitement. "There's a second layer in the message, a pattern within the pattern." She showed them what she had found. Hidden in the background noise of the original signal was another code. "It's instructions," she said, "for humans inside the moon base." Everyone stared at her. "But there are no humans in the moon base," George said. "No," Alan agreed. "But maybe there need to be." Admiral White understood. "Immediately. You're saying someone needs to go to the moon? Now? With those things in orbit?" The lunar module isn't ready, a NASA official protested. It's still in testing. It's our only chance, Alan said. We need to get to that base. A heated debate followed. Some thought it was suicide. Others saw no alternative. Finally, Admiral White made the decision. We're sending a team. The lunar module will launch tonight under cover of darkness. We'll create a distraction to keep the Kreks focused. Elsewhere. Who's going? Linda asked. Volunteers only, the Admiral said. This is a one-way mission. With the Kreks in orbit, there may be no coming back. Alan stood up. I'm going. Me too, George said. I should go, Linda added. I know more about satellite systems than anyone here. They all looked at Kathy. No, George said firmly. You're too young. I decoded the message, Kathy argued. I found the second layer. You need me. She's right, Alan said quietly. We need her. As the meeting ended, Dr. Brown pulled Alan aside. You don't have to do this, she said. Yes, I do, he replied. For 20 years I've been listening to the stars, hoping for a sign we're not alone. Now I know we're not. I need to see this through. That night, while the world waited in fear, 4 unlikely heroes boarded an experimental spacecraft. Their destination, a mysterious alien facility on the far side of the moon. Their mission, to save humanity. As the countdown began, Alan looked at his companions, a retired Navy man, a satellite engineer, and a teenage girl who loved science. Not the team anyone would have chosen to save the world, but they were humanity's last hope. The spacecraft shook violently as it left Earth's atmosphere. Alan gripped his seat, knuckles white. He had never been to space before. None of them had, except for George, who had once trained as an astronaut before an injury ended his career. Everyone, okay? George asked, checking the controls. He had been given a crash course in flying the experimental craft which NASA called Falcon. I think I'm going to be sick, Kathy said, looking pale. Just breathe slowly, Linda advised, though she didn't look much better herself. The shaking stopped as they left the atmosphere. Through the small windows they could see Earth below them, beautiful and blue, and surrounding it the dark shapes of the Kreks ships. Will they see us? Alan asked. The launch was on the dark side of Earth, George explained. And this ship has some kind of stealth technology, but we need to stay in Earth's shadow as much as possible. The journey to the moon would take nearly a day. They took turns sleeping in the cramped cabin while George kept the ship on course. As they approached the moon, they could see its gray surface getting larger in the windows. We're approaching the coordinates, George announced. Starting descent. Landing on the moon was almost as rough as leaving Earth. The ship bounced twice before settling on the dusty surface. We're here, George said. The far side of the moon. Now what? They put on the spacesuits that had been prepared for them. Each suit had enough air for about 8 hours. They would need to find the alien base quickly. Stepping onto the moon was strange. They moved slowly in the low gravity, taking careful steps. The landscape around them was barren and gray, with craters and rocks as far as they could see. The coordinates point that way, Linda said, checking a device on her wrist. About 2 miles. They walked in silence, saving their oxygen. The Earth was not visible from this side of the moon, making them feel very alone. Above them, the stars shone brightly against the black sky. Look, Kathy pointed after they had walked for nearly an hour. That crater looks different. She was right. Among the natural moon craters was one that seemed too perfect, too circular. As they got closer, they could see that its edge was smooth, not rough like the others. This has to be it, Alan said. They stood at the edge of the crater looking down. It appeared empty, just a bowl-shaped depression in the lunar surface. Now what? George asked. The message said there were instructions for humans inside the base, but I don't see any base. Kathy walked around the edge of the crater, studying it carefully. The message had a sequence of numbers at the end, she said. What if it's not just coordinates but a code? She pulled out a small device and typed in the numbers. Nothing happened. Maybe we need to be in a specific spot, Linda suggested. They spread out around the crater's edge, each taking a different position. Wait, Alan called. The original message mentioned star positions. What if we need to stand in a pattern? Kathy checked her notes. The message showed 5 points arranged like a constellation. There are only 4 of us, George pointed out. The fifth point could be the center of the crater, Linda said. They positioned themselves around the crater according to the pattern in the message. When they were in place, Kathy entered the code again. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground, beneath them, began to vibrate. In the center of the crater, the lunar dust shifted, revealing a metallic surface underneath. A seam appeared in the metal, widening into an entrance. It worked, Kathy exclaimed. They carefully made their way down into the crater and approached the opening. It led to a tunnel sloping down into the moon. They switched on the lights on their helmets and entered. The tunnel was smooth and clearly artificial. After walking for several minutes, they reached a large chamber. As they entered, lights came on automatically, revealing a space filled with strange technology. Crystalline structures rose from the floor, glowing with soft blue light. Along the walls were symbols similar to those in the warning message. "What is this place?" George whispered. "Some kind of control room, I think," Linda said, examining the crystals. "But I don't recognize any of this technology." In the center of the room stood a large crystal formation shaped like a pillar. At its base was what looked like a control panel with more symbols. The message said this was built by a race called the Archivers, Alan said. They fought the Kreks before and lost. This must be some kind of leftover defense system. Kathy moved toward the central pillar. How do we activate it? As she approached, the crystal began to glow more brightly. A beam of light shot out from it, forming a 3-dimensional image in the air, a map of the solar system, with Earth and the moon clearly visible. Around Earth were red dots representing the Krek ships. "It's responding to our presence," Alan said. The image changed, showing symbols flowing past too quickly to read. Then it stabilized, showing what appeared to be instructions. "I can't understand this," George said, frustrated. "Wait," Kathy said. "It's changing." The symbols were shifting, becoming more recognizable. After a few moments, they formed into English words. "It's adapting to us," Linda said in wonder. "It's learning our language." The message now read, "Defense System Archiver 37, identify threat for activation." "The Kreks," Alan said clearly. 53 ships in Earth orbit. They've threatened to destroy us." The image changed again, showing the Krek ships in more detail. Data streamed across the display in both alien symbols and English. "Krek's Empire warships identified," the system displayed. "Threat assessment, extreme. Defense protocols may be initiated if Kreks violate Galactic Covenant." "What's the Galactic Covenant?" George asked. New text appeared. "Treaty established by elder races. Prohibits unprovoked aggression against developing species. Krek's Empire signatory but frequent violator." "They've already threatened us," Linda said. "Isn't that a violation?" "Threats not sufficient for protocol activation," the system responded. "Direct hostile action required." Alan felt his heart sink. "So we can't activate the defense system unless they attack first? By then it could be too late." "What happens if they do attack?" Kathy asked. The system displayed. "Full defense response authorized. Krek's fleet neutralization probable." "Neutralization? You mean you can destroy their ships?" George asked. "Affirmative." They looked at each other, the weight of the situation sinking in. They had found the defense system but couldn't use it unless the Kreks attacked first. And by then millions might die. "We need to contact Earth," Alan said. "Tell them what we've found." But when they tried to use their communication system, they found that the signal couldn't penetrate through the moon's mass from their position. "We need to go back to the ship to send a message," George said. "There's no time," Linda argued. "The Krek's deadline is in less than 5 hours." "So what do we do?" Kathy asked, looking at each of them. "Just wait here and hope the Kreks make the first move," Alan stared at the display showing Earth surrounded by alien warships. Their home. Everything and everyone they cared about. We wait, he said finally. And we pray the system works when we need it. Back on Earth, world leaders argued about what to do. Some wanted to fight the Kreks, even though Earth's weapons seemed useless against their ships. Others wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. The deadline was now just 3 hours away. Any word from the Moon team? Admiral White asked in the command center. No, sir, an officer replied. We lost contact after they landed. They might be too far on the dark side for signals to reach us, Dr. Brown suggested. Or something in the lunar base might be blocking communications. The Admiral looked at the screens showing the Krek ships in orbit. We're running out of time and options. On the Moon, Alan and the others watched the Archiver system's display. It showed a countdown to the Krek's deadline. 3 hours remained. I can't just sit here, George said, pacing nervously in his spacesuit. We should try to get back to the ship, contact Earth. And tell them what? Linda asked. That we found a defense system that won't work unless the Kreks attack first? That won't help. Maybe we could trick the system, Kathy suggested. Make it think the Kreks have already attacked. Alan shook his head. I don't think we can fool technology this advanced. So we just wait? George asked. We wait, Alan confirmed. The hours passed slowly. They explored more of the lunar base, finding rooms filled with strange devices. Linda examined them, trying to understand how they worked. Kathy continued studying the symbols on the walls, looking for any helpful information. George checked their spacesuits, making sure they had enough oxygen. Alan stayed in the control room watching the display. With 1 hour left before the deadline, the display suddenly changed. It showed one of the Krek's ships breaking from the formation around Earth. Something's happening, Alan called to the others. They gathered around the display, watching as the ship moved to a position over the Pacific Ocean. What are they doing? Kathy asked. The answer came moments later. A beam of energy shot from the ship toward Earth's surface. The display zoomed in to show the target, a small, uninhabited island. The island exploded in a flash of light, completely destroyed. They attacked, George whispered. They didn't even wait for their own deadline. On the control panel, new symbols appeared, then changed to English. Covenant violation detected. Direct hostile action against developing species confirmed. Defense protocols activated. The crystal pillar in the center of the room began to pulse with bright light. The display showed energy building within the lunar base. It's working, Linda said. The defense system is activating. On Earth, people watched in horror as the island was destroyed. In the command center, Admiral White and his team saw it happen in real time. That was a warning shot, someone said, showing what they can do to our cities. Sir, an officer called out. We're detecting a massive energy buildup on the far side of the Moon. The lunar base, Dr. Brown said. Alan and the others must have activated something. The display showed a beam of energy shooting from the Moon into space. But instead of heading toward the Krek ships, it seemed to pass harmlessly through them. Did it miss? George asked, watching the same thing on their display. I don't think so, Alan said, studying the readings. Look, it's not an attack beam, it's a signal of some kind. For several long moments, nothing seemed to happen. The Krek ships remained in position. Earth waited in fear. Then, one by one, small points of light appeared within each alien vessel. What's happening to their ships? Kathy asked. The display zoomed in, showing the light points growing larger inside each Krek ship. They expanded rapidly like bubbles of energy. The system is doing something to them from the inside, Linda realized. On Earth, people looked up at the night sky in amazement. The Krek ships were glowing, becoming brighter and brighter. In the command center, the readings went crazy. Energy levels off the charts, an officer reported. The alien ships are experiencing some kind of internal reaction. It's the same on all ships, another added. Whatever's happening, it's affecting their entire fleet. The first ship exploded in silence, becoming a brief new star in the sky before fading. Then another, and another. Within 3 minutes, All 53 Krex ships had been destroyed. The lunar base, the team watched in stunned silence as the display showed the remains of the fleet. Nothing but scattered debris now. It worked, George said finally. The defense system destroyed them all. The crystal pillar's light faded slightly, but it continued to pulse. The display changed, showing new information. Defense successful, it read. Krex fleet neutralized. Warning. System power reserves at critical level. Final protocol initiated. Final protocol? Linda read. What does that mean? From the base of the pillar, a small section opened up. Inside was a crystal, smaller than the others but glowing with the same blue light. Knowledge transfer module prepared, the display read. For survivors of defended species. Alan reached for the crystal hesitantly. I think it's giving this to us. As he touched the crystal, the display showed one last message. Defense system shutting down. Power depleted. Good fortune, humans. The lights in the base began to dim. The crystal pillar's glow faded until only the small crystal in Alan's hand still shone. We need to get back to the ship, George said urgently. Before we lose light. Completely. They made their way back through the tunnel as the base shut down behind them. When they reached the surface, they could see Earth in the sky, still there, still safe. The journey back was quiet. Each of them lost in thought about what they had witnessed. When they finally made contact with Earth, the cheers and tears of relief from the command center told them everything they needed to know. Earth had been saved. Weeks later, scientists began to understand the crystal Alan had brought back. It contained vast amounts of information, knowledge from the archivers about space travel, energy systems, and the other species in the galaxy. It was their gift to humanity. They knew they were dying, Alan explained to a room full of world leaders and scientists. The archivers. They fought the Krex but couldn't save themselves. So they left these defense systems near promising young planets, hoping to give other species a chance they didn't have. And the system destroyed itself to save us, Dr. Brown added. Alan nodded. It used all its power. There won't be any more help from the archivers. We're on our own now. But not unprepared, Kathy said, looking at the crystal. They gave us knowledge, a head start. And a warning, Linda added. The Krex Empire still exists. These were just their scouts. One day, they might come looking for what happened to their ships. Then we'd better get to work, George said. As Alan looked around the room at the faces of humans from every nation, he felt a strange mix of fear and hope. The universe was more dangerous than they had imagined, but also more wondrous. And humanity was no longer alone. The crystal glowed in its case, the light of a long-dead civilization reaching across time to help a young species take its first steps into a larger galaxy.